How the hell do you miss Mike? call this board, special board meeting to order. Just to note that this public meeting is being recorded in accordance with Montana law. All those in attendance are advised that the public portions of the meeting will be recorded in audio and video format by remaining in the meeting. Those present consent to being recorded and displayed in footage that will be posted on the school district's website. Please contact the district office if you have any questions concerning Hamilton School District's recording obligations under Montana's open meeting law. Any public comment on anything that is not on the agenda? All right, let's get rolling here. So first things first, the almighty ice rink.
The ice rink. Well, I wish I had a more solidified plan for you. We've been in communication for the last couple of weeks, talking about the site and getting clarification on the site. Christine had a phone call today and some correspondence. There's still more work to be done on this before we can move forward. I feel as though we are running short of time. Some of the prep work that needs to be done, the ground is going to freeze. And we would like to have some site planning in place for the number of buildings and, what we're going to do with the drainage or water, so that some of those things are in place, and I think that's going to take a little bit of time. So we're still in communication and in regular communication, but at this point, we are kind of a wait and see. They're talking about a couple of things and getting some things going, primarily an engineering plan so that we have a site plan, and then going from there. Questions?
Questions or anything like that? For me, it seems like a wait and see, and maybe we wait and see until next year. So,
Yeah.
I think they're running out of time.
If I understand the Downtown Association, they were hoping to have some things in place in January, but it would require the ordering of things and getting things established in early December, which, this is the earliest part of December we can get into, but yeah, so there's more work to be done to get this off the ground.
Sounds good. All right. Well, more to see possibly next meeting, which is coming up quick.
All right.
All right. Any other questions, concerns? There's no action to be done at this stage. All right. Next one, 2026 school election resolution, potential election issues, and ballot language, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so in your packet, I have a couple of proposals. One for a potential technology levy, and some rationale for that. Really, the reason for the technology proposal is we have ongoing costs, obviously, that are technology related. What I really aspire to give our teachers is appropriate devices, appropriate access to the tools for curriculum, and ultimately that impacts students, giving students the right kind of support with the right kind of learning tools in place for our teachers. So the technology expenses are growing each year. Our general fund increased by 72% in technology expenses from 23, 24 to 24, 25. I don't see that necessarily slowing down. And ultimately, when you're paying for those sorts of things out of the general fund, what ends up happening is you have to squeeze in other areas. And I feel like we are at a crossroads for figuring out how to best support our teachers and giving them the adequate tools to be able to effectively do their work. And so you have some tables and figures in your packet that show some of our technology related expenses. So if you would direct your attention to this particular page that has some information on it, you can see up at the top, you've got the various funds that have some technology expenditures in them. And when you look just at the general fund from one year to the next, that's a 72% increase there. Overall, when you're looking at all the different funds, you are increasing by 58% in a year. So that's just our basic budget stuff there. And then when you look at some of the expenditures from our ESSER purchases back a few years, you have lots of devices and hardware and things like that, things that only Mike understands. And then you also have some safety features in there. So in the middle of that bottom table, you've got doors, vape detection, pod doors, band and choir exterior doors. Those are critical expenditures for maintaining the safety of our buildings. And what, looking at this and laying this all out, really this is about giving our educators the tools to be able to best help our students in terms of curriculum and instruction. I think this is a critical proposal. I know it's a big ask, but there is definitely the numbers to justify that request. When you look back a page at the property tax information, when you look at the average home in our district, you're ranging anywhere from $400,000 to $600,000 in that range. And so what I am figuring is if you look at the $500,000, which is the request for the technology fund, the $72.50 is the amount taxed on a $600,000 home. That is annually. That is an annual increase. So when you break that down month by month, it's $6.04 per month for that amount of money. So that gives you an idea of the impact upon property tax. Questions so far on this?
And this is market value, not taxable value.
Right, what you're seeing in the left-hand column is the market value of the home, yes.
Because usually we do the other way and nobody understands it. Or what the board does, but the community doesn't.
Yeah. Well, I think where confusion can get caught up is the $72.50 being assessed monthly rather than annually. That's a huge difference. So when you're talking about $72, that's broken up over 12 installments.
So just for clarification, is it, this is kind of building off of Mark's question. So we've had these kind of questions before and they're confusing. Was this table considered in relationship to assessed value versus market value? And it is market value that we're talking about here?
Yes, Kathy, this is an OPI table, correct? So we're talking about market value of the homes here on the left-hand
Not
side.
assessed value?
Yeah.
Okay.
When you're talking about your taxable value, you're really then taking your market value and your tax rate and your and the number of mills required and dividing that by 1,000. That gives you your taxable value. That's really where the numbers are driven there. So it's a big number. I think it's and I mean, you know, these numbers are, I'm respectfully proposing this because I know that, you know, money is tight for folks. I get that. I really feel like this is a critical expense for our students and our teachers to move our district forward and continue to increase the quality and experience that our students have.
So what is the consequence of not passing this? What are we gonna have to do?
Good question. I mean, ultimately, you know, you only have so much. And so you have to make priority decisions about what to do at that particular point. I don't mean this, definitely no ultimatum to any of this, But if we want to be better, we're going to have to make some change to the amount of money in technology that we're spending. It's just, that is an ongoing expense for us, that it's just the way of education right now.
So what's the consequence? Where are we taking it from? It's gonna have.
Primarily, it comes out of the general fund.
Right.
And so that, ideally, you're paying your salaries and things out of that.
I guess what I'm
Yeah,
getting.
and that's where you end up having to squeeze. Unfortunately, and this is a Montana thing, this is just a budgetary thing, is we oftentimes, you have to have your teachers in your classrooms, and I mean that with all due respect. It's not a have to, we get to have our teachers in there, but when we have to start to shrink our budgets and what we're spending, a lot of times that's at the expense of the tools that they need in their classroom. It's supplies, it's curriculum, it's all the things that make the job simpler and more effective. It's like the analogy of, I'm gonna go mine for gold, which, making the analogy, our educators are out mining for gold. And they're doing the work, but we send them into the mine and we don't give them the tools to do the work. And then they have to discover their own ways and their own methods of trying to most effectively, and they do a great job and they put in a ton of time to do that. But that's where things start to break down.
Yeah, I guess where I'm trying to go here with hopefully there's some public observance and things on this, but I'm still scratching my head at how to relate to the public that this is not a slop the hog situation. Somebody isn't getting a kickback, all that kind of stuff that everybody thinks, because as you go through that history on the back, rather daunting track record that we have. So how do we communicate to the public that the necessity to facilitate a decent education through technology now becomes at the expense if we don't go past the levy, that we'll have to compromise in class size and teachers and what are we, because obviously we gotta do math somehow, because the math isn't math. And so I guess what I'd like to be able to communicate to people that ask me questions is, okay, look, here's kind of where we're at. If we're not able to pass this technology levy, then we have to pull it from here, here, and here, and the consequences of those things are, you're gonna lose these opportunities or this, whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, just simply replacing devices in classrooms, whether it's a student Chromebook or an interactive board in the classroom. Those sorts of things would start to deteriorate over time because and then you're gonna fall behind in terms of resources.
But to be clear, I'm 100% in favor of the technology levy. I'm 100% in favor of giving dollars we need for education, but just in trepidatious or apprehensive or just plain disenchanted with trying to convince the group of people in Hamilton that it's worth their frickin' $72 a year so that the kids get a decent education, it seems like a pretty.
Well, and I think that's
apparently they don't feel that way.
one of the important pieces to us, the effort that we make in this process is going to be, we as a board have to be well-informed and clear about what the ask is and why we're asking. Our staff and administration have to have that same level of knowledge because that is where the conversations happen. That is when, when you want to know what's this all about, you're going to the people that that work in the building, and that's not always us sitting at this table. You're gonna go ask questions of Erica Dowd or teachers on the staff or paras, and if they're well informed and they're clear with their friends and family and community members that this is what this is for and this is why we're doing this, that builds some momentum. The other thing is we have to have a plan to get out into the community, whether it's trustees, myself, and have conversations with people. And honestly, we need to talk with people that disagree more than we need to talk with people that agree. And we need to share the rationale. I think what I'm proposing here is a logical request, but at the same time, people have to make decisions that they feel is best for their family and their income. And I respect that, and I think we all in this room do respect that. But I think we have to have the conversation.
So when talk about the technology, I was looking at last year that, did purchase some Chromebooks and cards. What specifically are we gonna be purchasing something with the tech levy? Are we just gonna try to increase our licensing and software? What's kind of our goal to continue to replace?
Yeah, I think we need to get into a rotation of device upgrades. So as things sunset and we need to upgrade, we have to have a routine in dealing with the hardware that needs to be replaced. But I also, this is a critical piece to this, it's not only having the hardware, but the hardware is necessary because 90% of the curriculum that is available for our teachers is online. And so then it's not only the devices, but it's the subscriptions. And back in the days when I was in school, you could have a textbook that made it 30 years. And you could just keep throwing duct tape on the textbook and yeah, we'll use that again next year. Now, in this age, when the subscription is up, it's gone. It's no longer available to us. So you can't take the binding on the book. That is where a bulk of our curriculum comes from, is online.
So they really aren't making books anymore?
They are, yeah.
So,
but
but
those
you're
are-
saying
that's
it's not an option?
It's usually the book company, the textbook companies will sell you a hard copy with the supplemental technology. And oftentimes the technology that's really important to that is very well tied together. When that technology is out, it's out. But there are physical textbooks, you bet.
We're talking 500 Gs yearly, right? But we just, yes, in the first numbers, those that you pointed out, a percentage increase in cost by 72%, right?
Yeah, that's a general fund year, 1 year to the next. And then overall, when you consider all funds, it's a 58% increase.
So the question is how long is that 500K sufficient for 25, 26 to get where we need to go? And then if it goes up by whatever percentage of 26, 27, then we're gonna need 700K, then we're gonna need $1 million kind of thing. So if that, how long is that 500K yearly? What's our duration on this thing?
It is a 10-year levy
So it's 500K a year for 10
for
years.
10 years.
And what's our estimate on what we need this year?
Well, I think,
500K?
yes. And then I think we
So what
have,
does that leave us at 26, 27? Or 27, 28?
I think,
that's a good question.
I think as he's talking about going through rotational stuff, even just looking at 24, 25, there's a $63,000 year tuition. That's a whole lab at the high school. That's what that is. So as you go to rotational, you'll hold those lines a little bit better. And I know Mike.
be as extensive.
Exactly, because we're buying, and we've done this over the years, we just buy like one-time shots, big chunks. And that's, ESSER funds, if you guys remember that, the same thought process, we bought tons of Chromebooks at that time. If we go to a more consistent, which is a rotational thought process, then it will be more level. It's the same thought process, we're not talking about the switches, but I know Mike has a whole plan about the cloud and the switches that we go through with that and getting that cost to spread over a time period, which means that when you go to about 500,000, you're not going up and down as much. In the past, technology, it was a small fund, and we just basically, anytime we got a little bit of money, we'd buy them. That's what we would do. And that's what happened to ESSER, and that's what would happen when we got the tuition fund, we would just buy. This is a much more, in my opinion, a much more reasonable plan of what most people do in terms of like making sure that you are spreading this technology thought process out. So you're not buying like 40 Chromebooks at one time, but you're actually, replacing the ones as you go through. Same with the switches and all that kind of stuff. You're upgrading those things on time. Instead of what we used to, I think we spent like $75,000 on switches one year because we just had money and we just bought them. And so I think this is a much metered thought process, what you would do for most corporations, honestly, of metering that out, so you're not getting hammered with these big purchases.
It's exactly what we do in my office, it's just,
Yeah.
you get your expiring stuff and you have rotation. I guess the reason for the question is does anybody have a feel as if asking for a $500,000 is a bunch different than asking for 400K or asking for 650K when we're talking about this thing? Is it adequate? First and foremost, is it adequate for our needs and how long is it adequate? Right, because if it's inadequate within a year, then we probably should be thinking a little differently on the amount. And if it's, if there is some sort of, I guess, number that becomes just a huge mind block for people to vote in favor of, where is that? I don't have the answer for that, I'm just.
I think the 500,000 request is bumping up against that. I think that any higher than that, I feel like that becomes a bitter pill to swallow.
Right.
And I think that we can, if we're planning and thoughtful about how we're spending that 500K each year in those increments, I think that's gonna sustain us for years to come. When we get to year 8, 9, and 10, that could be where there's some struggle and reevaluation of that number. I'm hoping in 10 years that, things have changed for school funding in Montana. I'm optimistic that way. And maybe it's a different conversation at that particular point. I do want to point out too, when you look at all the hardware and the things in here, all of that was purchased at essentially the same time.
That's right.
And so you have an awful
Lot.
of hardware devices that were purchased about the same time. And they're all gonna fade away at about the same time. Mike, do you want to speak to any of this? I know I'm.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of different layers to this. I don't know how much the board wants to go into it, but from the wheelhouse that I make an honest effort of managing, keep in mind that there's an educational component to it, but there's also a business component. So this is an important thing to wrap into this when we're talking about how do we present this to the community is there's a significant percentage of the numbers that Dave has presented to you that are just, as those of us who are business owners know, and those of us in the room that are business owners know, a part of that is just running our business, is the licensing requirement, as well as the hardware requirement and the network that supports it all. Another thing that I would add, as a piggyback on some of the things we've talked about so far, is the reality is that, and again, those of you who are business owners realize this, is that the licensing costs are getting a little bit silly in terms of the increase. For example, Cisco did a 60% increase in the licensing for our phone handsets last year when we reviewed 60% for 1 year. And when I reached out to our Cisco representative and what is this? This is pretty big. He's like, yeah, all of the schools are struggling with this because it appears that these organizations like Cisco are thinking of things in terms of businesses that can absorb these kinds of increases, and it's much more challenging, as you well know, for us as a district. And I only mention that Cisco is because that has happened to us a few times where from 1 year to the next, as Dave was alluding to, a lot of these products are no longer purchasing the disk and owning the disk like we used to do with an Adobe product, and you had that disk for forever. As long as it kept spinning, every time you put it in the computer, you could load it and install that on a piece of hardware. That's no longer the reality with a company like Adobe. Now, as Dave was alluding to, you have to actually buy a year-to-year license. So it's no longer buy it and, okay, we've got this disk for as long as it functions. Now it's literally a year-to-year requirements that you have to have for budgeting. So that's another thing that sort of insinuated its way into this phenomenon that we're speaking of right now is part of it is the reality of keeping up with these costs and as Patrick was mentioning, trying to get into more of a refreshment cycle as opposed to just these large sums. But then the other piece of it is that, again, in the wheelhouse that I try to manage, we're getting these new costs that have risen up just because of the way these companies do business now compared to what they did even 5 years ago.
What kind of usable lifespan do we have left on this giant chunk that we bought with ESSER funds, all these hardware things?
The cool thing about
Are they
that,
gonna all die next year, or
No.
kind of trickling out?
I think Google saw this coming, and I brought this up at a board meeting, I think about 2 years ago was the last time this came up, so it's probably a little stale in our mind, but originally when you bought a Chromebook, you got a 3-year license. They would be supported for 3 years, and then they bumped that to 5 years. literally, after 3 years, it's like a lot of our iPads or our Apple devices, they simply would stop taking updates. It just wasn't an option. With the Windows device, they've only started doing that recently where they've put an end date on it. So right now, what we have for Chromebooks is Google just saw this phenomena, and I think for whatever reason just saw that they were in a position to make this a lot easier on educational institutions, and so they extended that to 10 years. So I don't remember exact dates on all of the purchases, Kathy would be better at that, but the vast majority of the devices, Chrome devices that we bought for classroom needs, we're gonna go for another 10 years.
And
So we've still got a good 5 years on those, I believe.
are they still adequate to run everything they need to run?
Yeah, I mean, that's the beautiful thing about a Chromebook, is it's literally just a browser with a keyboard. There's not a whole lot of hardware behind it, there's nothing that really needs.
So that does give us the opportunity to start replacing in chunks, not in a massive amount.
Right, and we've started doing that with laptops, that the staff use. Those are, we've bought, higher end devices now. We try to reach that sweet spot where our return on investment was really pushing us into the future. But right now, the goal, that I've expressed to the building administrators is try to purchase at least 5 laptops, and those are right around $1,000 a piece, and rotate those in. We take the older devices that the teachers are, letting go of, and we turn those into substitute teacher laptops, or we're deploying the paraprofessionals. So we do a lot of that as well, but yeah, I think in terms of duration, you can expect about 5 years from an average laptop, depending on the manufacturer, and then the Chromebooks, currently you can get 10 years out of those. So there's lots of other layers to it, but I don't wanna belabor the point on any of these. You know, we have big hardware chunks that come up. We just made some purchases for the switches that Patrick was alluding to. We're good for another few years. We've got a phone system purchase that we're due in 2028. So yeah, I think what as much as we're trying to do here is also spread some of these costs out, so some of these impending costs that we have coming up are not as much of a hit to the budget in general.
Give you a few comparisons too of some districts that are similar and somewhat surrounding us. Frenchtown's technology fund is $258K. Stevensville, which is expiring this year, is $300K. Whitefish is $587K. And then Bozeman, couple AA districts, Bozeman is 1.6 million. Missoula is 2.8 million, ours is 39,000.
So going to the public, I mean, we know what it will pay for, right? But what's kind of like when we go to the public, what do we say to them and say, hey, this will bring us up to here? Like what will the public see? What can they expect that if they get this, Hamilton will go from here to here? What does that look like?
Let me ask this, what do folks want to see from us? When you're interacting with people, what do they want to see in that way? And maybe that's to everybody. For me, I think that this, very simple-minded person, but this is really about giving our students and teachers the tools to be effective and to put ourselves in a position to where we can be proactive about things rather than reactive and scrambling. If we get into systems of these are the devices and these are the things and the places that we want to make changes and upgrades, and these are the purchases that we need to make in terms of curriculum and plan that out year to year. Honestly, and I said this in my recent evaluation, this is about teaching and learning, and that's we have high quality and high standards for teaching and learning in our district, and it's in my mind, it's my job to take that to the next level. And this is about an investment in quality more than anything. That's what I would tell people.
I think we should, when we put this out, we should change the table and show monthly value and make people calculate out the yearly as opposed to the reverse.
The problem is I believe it has both in the ballot language, you have to have both.
Because there's the next page there is the shows what the ballot language should be, and you have to put, the yearly amount, and it goes by the 100,000, 300,000, and the 600,000 market value. But then also, when you look at the ballot language, it's very specific on what it can be used for. Because if you look at it, for the purchases, purchasing, renting, repairing, and maintaining technological equipment, including computers and computer network apps. That's cloud computing services for technology, infrastructure, platform, software, network, storage, security, data, database, test environment, curriculum, or desktop virtualization purposes, including any subscription or any licenses. So it's, I think, because sometimes when, like in a general fund request, it's more, it's not as specific as the technology levy.
That paragraph doesn't say monthly or yearly.
No, it's in the next one, it says passage of.
Yeah, it doesn't say, I just read it.
Increase the market value.
I approximately blank.
But that's just on the ballot, right? We can advertise them with the monthly.
It's required, that's what
So, but we don't put in that paragraph that it is yearly or monthly?
We do, we just read it wrong half the time.
Because if that's the exact ballot language, I don't see monthly or yearly in the paragraph, is what I'm saying.
It does, it's because you hear the click here.
So you put dollars per year?
Yeah.
Okay, that's where
But we can talk about monthly in the newspaper and.
I know, but we did that with the last one. We threw a party at the middle school. We had people show up and when we looked up their stuff on the cadastral, and then I still had people show up at my office. I was like, well, I can't afford $500 a month. Like, what house are you living in?
So,
Well, and I think, because this is the minimum, so, and I will double check, because, if we can add monthly instead of, yearly, and I will check and see, because like I said, this, you have some range.
Yeah. If it allows us to say monthly and yearly, at least it says it there, right? Because that was just the most commonly argued point. It was so daft last time, it blew my mind.
so David, what I'm thinking, like, the $72 a year makes complete sense to me. I know technology is important. I think what occurs to me, I think other people might be thinking too, is like, I don't think screens and devices and technology is the end all be all in education. I think we need to communicate how we also think we can learn and teach without screens, because I think that's an important thing too. And that could be part of it.
I think that's a good point. I think that's a really good point. I think that it's not, we don't want to be an exclusively technology-based experience, but I would like to do some hands-on things.
Absolutely. Our kids need to learn how to use computers and engage with them. And they need to learn how to read books and think for themselves too. Everything shouldn't be on a screen. And something shouldn't be on a screen.
I agree, and I think kind of going to Mike's point, and certainly back to Jenny's point, this is, I think, in the past, we've always had something that I hate to say selling what we're trying to do. And you can always sell quality, that's always makes sense, but people are just like, quality, what does that even mean? What's this? In the past, when we ran general levies, we were saying, we're gonna increase AP classes by this much, we're gonna do something like that. I think you can do that in this case, and do that in taking some of the stuff, saying, we need this money for technology or stuff, because we're going to be able to add XYZ program, and that may be a curriculum program, in just like what Mike's saying, of not just computer programs, but something curriculum, because that gives us that flexibility. That's something that I can easily go out and say, we're doing this because we want this program, or we're trying to get to this program, or something like that. That's something that I can say. It's hard to just say quality, because people will just be like, what does that mean? And they don't know what they're buying, I guess is the best way to put it. I hate to be that way, but that's kind of the thought process.
Well, and part of it too is, well, you've done it in the past. We have a quality education. Hamilton is in the top. But it's just hard when they're, like, look what we did in 2025. How do we,
Yeah, like what's,
communicate that that's not sustainable? And that's what I was just trying to come up with.
Yeah, because I mean, I think, I would love to say that, oh, it's because we're gonna pay our teachers more, and that has failed every levy in the state 1,000 times over. People just don't pay for salaries and teachers, it's terrible. But it's true. I'm looking at Mark because he knows. So we can't really say that. We have to look for something else that works and that things. I think we have tons of things that we can look at.
I hear you just discussing the comparative technology funds with our district and other districts, and ours sounds woefully inadequate. We need technology, but I think it's important to talk about what we are getting and how we're also not going to use technology in our schools. Like what kind of other experiences do our students get, or are we just looking to move exclusively to screen work?
So the answer to that is no, we don't want exclusive screen work, but yeah, communicating that message, I think is.
Okay, so am I
I think that's smart.
missing something? If we pass this levy at 500,000, some of these expenses that we're paying right now out of our general fund come off. Does that give us more money than in our general fund
Correct.
to pay for things like Mike is talking about?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean,
We're not adding 500,000 on to 462,000.
and so I'll just try to use Erica as an example. So she's out of her building budget is purchased a reading program. And trying to pilot this program and having some good success and looking to expand that. So we can't make that available to everybody because we don't have the funds to make that available to everybody. If that's the right curricular program for us, and we have pockets of our students that are getting that experience, why wouldn't we give that to all of them? And that's some of the things that we need to communicate. And I think the goal here is, I get the sense, I know there's apprehension about this, I get the sense that this is all about how we communicate with our community and how we interact about what we're asking for, why we're asking for it, and what education looks like in the Hamilton School District. I think we need to do some planning and get some clarity around that. And honestly, listen to some folks in the community and get some feedback that you'll have with people you know and other folks and develop this. Because we need to get this on the ballot in December. It doesn't mean we can't make adjustments to it based on some feedback, which I think would be the way to go.
So we talked about you potentially including or running in lieu of a safety levy, right? And we talked about wording and I mean, I've skimmed through this a couple of different times. And, we have 8 times in the last 30 years that we've passed something. We have 23 times that we've failed that something. And as I go down this list of failures, every time that a technology levy is listed, it's failed. Every time. There isn't a single time that the technology levy passed. There is half a dozen, well, not half a dozen, because there's only 8 total, but there's 3 different times that it has something to do with safety concern, urgent safety concern, raising money. The rest I'll say general fund for the purpose of supporting general fund, right? The only other time we passed anything was the athletic complex. So I'm not saying one's right or wrong. I just want to do something that people are going to vote for. And
I mean, we are in a different element too, right? So you're talking.
it is, I mean, we are looking at 30 past years.
I mean, you look at
Between the
tech levy, and one of them was back,
Yeah, what was technology in 94?
Exactly, I mean, I hate to tell you, I know what technology was in 94, but all of us do. So I think it looks a little different right now in terms of asking for that part of it. So I'm not concerned too much about that, because I think it's a different era. Even 2008, 2010, when we tried to fail things, I feel like it's a little bit of a different era. But I
agree,
I hear you though.
I just want it to be worded right, so I'm just saying if we can have the same result with something that statistically had maybe more success, maybe we should explore a $200,000 technology levy and a safety levy, or I don't know. It's worth a conversation, right?
I mean, I think one selling point, I don't know if this got out, I mean, it's a 10-year levy, which I know that gets a lot of people, most people hear levy and they think perpetual forever. This one is 10 years, it does have an end.
Yeah.
And that's a selling point for a lot of people, because there is an end to it, which means that we have to be
Is
creative.
safety levy the same way?
Safety level is an interesting one because you can be perpetual or you can set a time. So you can do both.
And are we talking about potentially trying to run safety at the same time as the technology, or do you think that will compromise our probability of passing either one? What will they vote the cheaper of the two and say, well, I'm gonna give you some, or are they gonna vote for neither because there's two? There's so much psychology here.
Absolutely. I mean, I am asking for what I believe the district needs. And so that's the $500,000 technology levy and then the $250,000 safety levy. I'm proposing both of those. Right now, just thinking about school safety, you're running into the situation where, yes, we've used some technology funds to pay for safety expenses in technology, and they're listed on here. But for me, this is also a transparency thing. When we're asking for safety money to be able to evaluate our facilities and make routine upgrades to safety in all of our facilities, but at the same time, providing a funding source for important personnel supports. So just having a conversation recently with Chief Snavely about SROs. So right now, we're operating with 2 SROs in the district, which we absolutely need. But the cost to us is reduced in half because there is a federal COPS grant that's helping us to do that. So really, we're paying for one, we're getting 2. And that is not going to last forever. And so not only that, having that safety resource on our campuses, but also being able to provide mental health support to students on our campus too. I think, when you're thinking about safety, I am a believer that safety is an inside-out job. It is about relationships, it is about connection, it is about kids feeling comfortable enough to tell teachers and adults that they trust that something's going on. That's where safety happens. And so having those folks with the high-level training, professional training to be available to kids is a critical safety ask. And the SROs function in the same way. If we've got SROs walking around interacting with our young kids in positive ways and not always when it's a crisis, that becomes a resource for our community and that becomes a resource for our schools. So yeah, I do. I know it's a lot and I am respectful of people's financial situations. But I want to advocate for our staff and our students and the resources that are here in the district and be able to make sure that we stabilize that for them.
I think if we have drafted, which I'm sure we will, and like you said, transparency, exactly what our intent is with each of those funds, so that's another one of my concerns is you have a $500,000 levy and a $250,000 levy. And I used to think in dentistry that I needed to prepare 3 plans for everybody. There was the bottom plan, the middle plan, and the high plan. And then I realized very, very quickly that almost everybody will always pick the middle plan. They will always pick that one because it seems like they're not compromising here, but they don't want to spend all here, so they're gonna go down the middle, right? And I'm a little concerned that if we say, here's a $250,000 deal, and here's a $500,000 deal, they're either gonna pick one or neither. And so I think we need to somehow, and I don't know how this happens because we tried really, really hard the last bond to make sure that people know exactly what we want item A for and exactly what we want item B for, and this is what we're gonna do, and then make sure that they know that that's what we do with it when we did it, if we did it, right? So
Can I just for the meeting in December, because this is the first year that the legislative changed it, so you do need to have a resolution calling for an election. But at that time, if you say that you're looking at running a technology levy or a safety levy, you don't have to have the amounts. You could just say, you know, you're intending on it, and then you have until February 24th is the deadline to make amendments to the election resolution. And then, actually, March then 26th is when the ballots are certified, and you need to have the exact amounts at that time. So you don't, you know, when you're thinking of this, you don't need the amounts right now if you're.
What does each one cost to run?
There's an election on May, right? 'Cause
There's
always a trustee election.
the trustee election, yeah,
So we're
so,
already doing one, so,
So we don't have to pay extra to put the levy
we gotta do
on
one.
there, okay?
no.
So that's why it's nice at that stage.
Because
In the resolution, do we have to say that we're running, it just says we're running on the period, right?
Right,
It
and you
doesn't say
don't,
that we have to tell them right now we're doing 2 levies or 2 safety unit. We just say,
well, 'cause I just drafted one up because you have to call for the election, because you got 2 trustee terms that are open. And then, to authorize the district to impose an increase in local taxes to support a new technology acquisition levy. And then authorize,
so we do have to
Local taxes.
declare which levy we're doing.
you don't have to now, you can just call for to do just the trustees, and then you have until February 9th to, actually February 24th, to make amendments to the election resolution. So you could do it, you know, either way, if you want to add in
But if we
February.
if we run a safety and a tech levy, do we have to say we're running 2? Or do we say we're just running a levy and then we can put 2 on the ballot?
I think that you need to be specific on what you're running, but I will double check that because,
Seems to be like it wouldn't be, but that's, because really what you're saying is that you were going to run a levy. You need to be specific at the time that you finally run it, but why does it matter? You're specific initially. You just have to say, that's what I would, because say, like, I think Eli's point's, you know, something that's obviously rattling around too. It's like when you run 2, you may get 1, you may get 0, or you may get both. But I think people have a tendency to be like, I'm giving them some here, I'm not giving them here, or I'm not gonna give it all, or something like that.
One vote,
Huh?
can you run up one vote?
What?
Can you say one? vote?
Together?
No, I think
You have to ask that separate, yeah. So, I don't know, so it does concern me, you know, looking at that aspect of it, the divide and conquer thought process.
So along that thought process, obviously, that's a decision that, you know, the board will have to make. I would, if we are going to choose just one, you know, we'll find a way with safety, but I would say, the technology would be the priority. Yeah.
I mean, with the funding that we have, SRO, the COP grant still has 1 more year on it, right?
I think it's
So
2.
two
I think it's 2.
So
incremental
you could,
So,
right, it drops in value, right, but we could consider running the tech levy as our main necessity in this spring with the safety levy following the next spring. Now, I mean, that has implications too, but, and it has its own challenges and hurdles and everything else, but the question in my mind remains, are we more likely to pass one run by itself, focus on that, or I think we've gotten into trouble before trying to overshoot, maybe do too much at once, maybe.
Well, yeah, and I think the other play on this too is obviously if we're thinking a bond anywhere in the future, this plays a role because people get confused by bonds and levies anyways.
We just gave you money, why would we run a bond?
Yeah, exactly. So it's just playing that game. Is that I like, you know, in terms of the tech levy, I like the time period in terms of like having an expiry on it. That's helpful. And that kind of stuff. Except we can run a safety level with an expiry as well. But I don't know, just like you said, I mean, the history is very, the public also gets very tired when we keep coming back. That's the other part of it too. We hear that constantly.
So with the technology, well, when it expires, the arguments we're making doesn't make it sound like we're not gonna need those funds in 10 years when it expires.
Well, I
We're
think-
just gonna have to redo a larger one.
Well, and I agree, and I think that's what Dave was saying, is that he's hoping, you know, with this whole new, infrastructure of trying to change the funding formulas for Montana, period, that's what you're thinking, is that hopefully that changes the game, and we don't have to come back after that. And so, in some ways, I like that, because it's kind of betting on that something's gonna happen on the funding formula. I don't know if it will or not.
Speaking of funding, do these two levies create, well, there already is a technology fund, but is there a separate safety fund? Will these levies go into their own funds? Or is this,
Yeah, they do. Yep. And they are earmarked for the purpose of what we're talking about. I think in the spirit of thinking about this, I think, you know, tonight was to kind of give you a little bit of food for thought and things to think about. I think, you know, I would suggest that you spend some time thinking about this over the next couple of weeks. I guess it's probably next week. But thinking about that, and then we have a conversation and set what the resolution does look like at the next board meeting.
Don't we have to have an action item at the next board meeting though?
Yeah, that's, I think, as I said, once again, you have to just, you don't have to know the number,
Right, we need to either know we're,
going or not.
so is that really what we're trying to determine is?
Is the number really up for debate, or is really the only debate we're having is whether we do one or the other, or both?
That's the only action we need, but I think the more we talk about number and how it's gonna be used, the less ahead of the game.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The number now doesn't make or break us anyway.
So what would the total cost
wouldn't put
per
us-
month be if we ran both of them?
That's like
I know
$6.
so-
$9. Hang on, I have this written down because.
Because it was 72.50, but I saw 72.50 on both of them.
Yeah, so $6.04 for the technology, and then for the safety, it's $3.02 per month, so less than 10.
So the overall total for a $600,000 home is like $120 a year, more or less.
Just about.
I can't remember the last time I went to Super One, spent less than $120.
Go to Costco. No, but it, you know, it's a lot of, for some people, this is not really the fact that it's the money, it's the principle.
Right.
And that's what I've come to realize the more I do this, it's not necessarily the money. They can give you $100 bill and be like, here you go, but that's not the point. The point is the principle. You're taxing me for what? And I think that's my biggest concern is what, you know, that thought process of what am I getting for this? And that seems to be, you know, because I still think middle school, we showed them what we could give them, and still, it wasn't the right thing for us to do.
I think people feel like the only thing they have control over saying no to is this specific type of tax, because everything else you just feel like it's stuck with. Right, so.
That being said, I mean, to me, you know, with the changes in property taxes and stuff like that from Montana, this is a good time to look at this as well, I think. So. Not for everyone, but for some people. So, any other thoughts?
Well, my thought is if we have to declare one or the other, I'd be more comfortable running the tech levy and postponing the safety levy. At this point, I think we'd be more likely to pass the safety or the tech levy by itself than if we try to put two together. That's just what I think. I may be 100% wrong. I have been a lot of times.
I would agree. I think we're gonna get lost in messaging if we try to run two. But we can think about it.
Think about it. So,
I'm with Eli.
The
don't we have to declare next Tuesday?
Yeah, next Tuesday. I was saying we got a week.
Right.
Yeah,
It'll be-
Think hard.
But then-
I'll call
but then
Kathy
you
next
have
Monday
until-
night.
but then you have until-
I changed my mind.
You've got until February to make amendments to.
Right, but you said we can't declare that we're gonna run one and then change it from a safety to a tech, or from a tech to a safety, or
I
say
think
we're gonna run.
in the spirit of transparency, I would either declare both and then pull one off, then add, but that's, that's up to you to decide.
What's that?
In some ways, I do, but I also think, when do voters see it? They don't see any of this. Do you know what I mean? They don't see any of that early, they're not paying any
You
attention to
don't
that.
see it till April when.
They don't see it till April. And so like, you can do a lot of things trying to figure out what you want, because what they're gonna see is when we start posting a ton about it, one, and two is when they see it in their ballot box and the mail. Truly, I mean, they may read a story about it, maybe, but it's really when it shows up in their box. And then they start looking at things to try to trend. All this kind of like, that part I probably won't pay. Some people will, but very few, I think, before life.
Well, just some numbers, so there are 8,226 active voters, and of those, 5,836 are absentees. So we have a very large, that's about 71% absentees, so that basically means that those ballots go out mid-April and people get them.
And we have an average of like, is it 1,600 votes per? I was reading that number, though, I might have my stats wrong, but I thought that of our voting populace, it was like between 1,600 and 1,800 actual votes cast.
That probably was about right.
I thought it was like averaged.
Yeah, I think it depends on what election. Obviously, we do it like a national election, you get a ton.
Right.
If you do it in like, for county commissioner.
I just would like
Or the
more than those
mayor.
1,800 votes come from, so we can talk to them.
And this is a primary. So
There will be one in June.
that's June.
So it's right before that.
So the only thing that's gonna be on the April one is trustees and this, right?
Well, the actual, it's May 5th is the
That's right.
election, but.
So, okay, cool. All right, well, everybody think on it. If you have questions, call
Thanks,
Dave, call Kathy, call whoever. I'll be. All right, anything else?
Appreciate it.
All right.